We will be showing a pre-recorded webinar video featuring Jesse Bennett, research engineer at NREL, explaining updates to the EV emissions calculator tool. I will then finish the session with funding opportunities available in Indiana. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please enter any questions you have into the Q&A box. We have set aside time at the end of the presentation for questions. We will now start the video.
The AFDC. Really exciting update for the emissions portions of the AFDC site, where we have a tool that kind of describes different emissions resulting from various vehicle drivetrains, especially with the advent of electric vehicle technology kind of taking over the auto industry. There's a lot of different drivetrain options out there between your classic hybrid electrics and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, as well as more modern like battery electric vehicles, and all of those have different implications for the emissions that they put out. And as Aaron had mentioned, a lot of times we try to provide the most valuable information, something that's really useful to you guys as the end users. And this was actually due for kind of, it was one of our regular updates. So we took a look at this year, and we have a couple updates that we're really excited to share with you. A couple of the new ones in terms of the electricity sources is we're looking at new assumptions and then more precise grid emissions. So before we had some assumptions that were a bit more on a national scale, and then we applied that to fueling mixtures on a per state level. We're getting a little more precise in some of the data that we've found and acquired, so we can get you more accurate and results that are very specific to your location. And then we're also updating various other assumptions, such as the gasoline well-to-wheels emissions and a few other metrics that are a result of just the evolving industries of different vehicle drivetrains and electric vehicles. So next slide. Yeah, so as Matt mentioned, this is something we're still kind of developing and looking to publish very soon on the site, but it's not quite yet available. So we're giving you a preview here, and there will be a couple different ways to navigate to this tool. We'll make sure that you can kind of access this at a bunch of different ways, the easiest way possible for you. But we will potentially have a link right on the AFDC homepage that is one of those kind of cycling banners, and one of them will actually be a highlight of this tool, as well as actually just on the AFDC tooling page. You can see at the bottom right, there will also be a specific link to this emissions calculator tool. And if you choose either one of those links, you'll be directed to this page that kind of gives you a brief overview of the tool. There will be an access to like an assumptions link at the bottom. But you'll see right away the national data that sort of looks at the emissions for each of these vehicle types on a national scale, and it also gives you sort of, you know, your classic pie chart that gives you the breakdown of fueling sources for electricity. Then you can dig deeper and look at your specific state or any specific state you're interested in, and then take a look at the results that come out of that state in particular, and the fueling input that comes into the emissions and electric grid, but as well as like the specific emissions data that EIA has captured. So next slide. And as I mentioned, one of the biggest benefits is we're documenting in a little bit more detail this time the specific assumptions as well as the calculations that we're going through on to kind of give you these results. So it's very well documented and could be recreated if you want to maybe adjust or tweak some of the assumptions there. But one of the things is we do document the electricity fuel mix, and as I mentioned, it's state-specific data that comes actually from EIA, the Energy Information Administration. And then we also look at the well-to-wheels emissions. We update that with the GREET model, so it kind of takes into account all of the emissions associated with burning a gallon of gasoline. That includes sort of the refining process and everything, not just the direct emissions from that. So it's a little bit more of a full life cycle analysis, because since we're considering the full grid emissions, it's also great to consider the full life cycle analysis emissions for gasoline as well, kind of compare the apples to apples. Then we're looking at efficiency assumptions, so sales weighted metrics, and this is where I talked about a little bit of the evolving different industries here, and as different new models come online, we want to make sure we're documenting those efficiency metrics so it reflects itself well in the tool, because what we'll do is we'll look at sort of an assumed annual vehicle miles traveled and what the emissions might be as a result from that for various drivetrains, and it's really important for that calculation to kind of break down the modern, the most popular vehicle models out there and what their efficiency numbers are. And we do that from sales-weighted calculations. So it's really representative of what's out there on the road today. And then we're also looking at a couple other updates from Oak Ridge's Transportation Energy Data Book. And you can go into dig into details on each one of these sources, and we document all of them and provide you links directly to our source of information, so you can really see where it's all coming from. Next slide. And then here's just a brief summary of some of these updated assumptions and specific metrics that we've revised from the previous version to this new 2020 update. And I just want to highlight a couple of things here. One, you can see how the average annual vehicle miles traveled, how much people are traveling. Obviously, this was prior to the current circumstances. It was basically some 2019 travel data numbers, but we're looking at annual vehicle miles traveled relatively similar, about 11,500 miles per year on average per person. And you can see here the gasoline industry hasn't changed very much. The welded wheels emissions as a result of burning a gallon of gasoline is still very similar there. But looking into some of the other technologies, I want to highlight in particular the electric efficiency, the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, as well as the battery electric vehicles. And both of those, you can see they're actually improving. And I think that a lot of that comes from, as I mentioned, the industry progressing, and these manufacturers are getting more efficient and more experienced at building these vehicle types, and that's resulting in much better drivetrains for the end users. So this increase in efficiency numbers are really going to help you drive on a cheaper sort of dollar per mile cost, but also give you a little bit extra range out of that battery. So if you think of a vehicle as having a standard size battery every single year, but manufacturers are giving you more efficient models every year, you're actually going to be able to get a little bit farther on each of that energy contained in that battery. And then all of these metrics are in either miles per gallon or miles per kilowatt hour. And the way we did that was so you can kind of compare and see just a larger number is better for both. Everyone might not be familiar with the concept of kilowatt hours, but kind of comparing 2.7 to 3.0, you can see the growth there, and a larger number is a better efficiency metric. Now, next slide. So this is where we start to get into the new EIA data. And I'm pretty excited about this because we're getting really detailed and providing you information that's very specific to your state. So we're taking a look at all of the fueling inputs that come into the grid and electricity grid. And we document those just as we did in the past in a pie chart, giving you sort of the percentage breakdowns of each fuel type and how much it's used for specific electric generation. But then we're also getting some specific emissions data as well that's state specific. And if we go into the next slide here, after this one, we have a little bit more details into the calculations as to how we go about that. So we're looking at sort of on a statewide or even national-wide scale, EIA is able to share the total metric tons of CO2 that's emitted as a result of electric generation. So this is strictly just electric power generation. And then we're looking at the total megawatt hours or energy that was generated from all that generation, those emissions. So how much electricity was generated and how much emissions came from that electric power. And when you go through this simple calculation, just a mild conversion to get you to this, this Z metric that we have here, it's the average emissions, so the average pounds of CO2 equivalent per every kilowatt hour consumed. And that's how we can then apply an emissions metric to the electric drivetrains, because we do have the emissions associated with gas combustion from, as I mentioned, the welded wheels emissions. But because every state has different generators, we want to make sure that we're accounting for each of the efficiency metrics of those generators. And that comes out in the total emissions that are documented from EIA. Next slide. And so here then, now that we're going into talking about emissions of different vehicle types, we also have the specific calculations documented for each drivetrain option. So we have emissions calculated for hybrid electric vehicles, internal combustion engines, as well as battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And something I think that's really interesting is looking at the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. You can see its emission calculation is much longer and more complex than any of the other drivetrain options, and that's because the plug-in hybrid actually has the ability, it's sort of two separate drivetrains that kind of can operate together but can also operate independently. So for that, you actually need to account for both gasoline emissions as well as electricity emissions from the grid. That's actually the only vehicle type that you need to concern yourself with both. Whereas the hybrid electric vehicle and the internal combustion engine, we actually have specific emission metrics. Those do not change on a per state basis because the well-to-wheels emissions are sort of a national number that's relatively consistent from state to state. But you can see in here, we're just documenting the calculations for battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids because that has a tendency to vary and fluctuate. If we go to the next slide here, we can get into a little bit more details about how that fluctuation is shared in the new updates to the tool. So here's just some standard results. This is kind of the top right is where you'd see the national averages. And this is a standard result that everyone would see when they first come to the tool. So you can get just a reference point for the entire country, looking at the different electricity source breakdowns. Something that's really interesting is you can see here how in the last couple of years, natural gas has actually overtaken coal as the #1 source of electricity energy in the country. And you can see down here, over here on the right side, one of the most interesting updates I think that's really helpful to users is if you look at the bar chart, there's actually 2 different colors, orange and blue, and the orange actually represents the electric emissions as a result of electric drivetrains operating, and then the blue is actually the gas emissions. And that's where, going back to that plug-in hybrid, you can see it's a second option there. It actually has blue and orange because, as I mentioned, there's 2 separate drivetrains and 2 separate types of emissions calculated. So, and you can see here how it's rather interesting for both of these examples on the national scale, as well as in Oregon, going from battery electrics to plug-in hybrids, and then gasoline. You can see the emissions actually for each drivetrain kind of increase as terms of the total emissions. And I wanted to highlight Oregon because I thought it was a very interesting result with the extreme penetration of hydro energy on their grid. Looking right here, it looks like in the upper 40s or 40% or so of electricity in Oregon comes from hydro energy. That actually results in a very low electric emissions for both plug-in hybrid and battery electric. So you can see the real big benefit there. And these tools also have similar the hover feature where on each of these bar charts you can hover over the bar and see the specific emission numbers as a result of each of these drivetrains. Next slide. So, and then finally, and this is actually a great response, I actually was able to get a chance and see some results from some of the questions earlier on today that sounds like some of you are very interested in getting these widget features to kind of share this information more directly with your stakeholders. So kind of limit the number of clicks they have. And we're actually providing that not only to the maps and charts, but also to the new emissions calculator here. And there is a widget tool that you'll be able to share this information with them, with your stakeholders on your website. And it's a very similar operation to what Aaron had shared before. And it's we think is quite user-friendly, but as mentioned before, you're more than welcome to reach out to our team and provide you with any support if you need some help setting that up.
All right. So I know Jesse and I will be hopping on here around the Q&A portion to help give you a better idea of some other tools. And then if you have questions about the tool he just shared, you'll be able to ask those questions. So now what I would like to do is make sure we cover just a couple funding opportunities that are available in Indiana, since this is, we're trying to make sure all of our Indiana stakeholders are able to go ahead and embark on their EV projects. So for the first one, I wanted to cover is that while there is the Volkswagen settlement funds coming up, what has been mentioned during this program is to always check with your utility providers on any EV programs, rebates, or incentives they may have. Many have established programs to help customers with the adoption of switching their fleet, or are making sure they're offering charging stations for their visitors and customers. And so as Jordan emphasized that, and Jesse has emphasized that as well, just please make sure you're always checking with your electric utility provider. Okay. So as we also mentioned is through the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, there's this great funding opportunity and that everyone refers to as Volkswagen settlement. And hopefully you are signed up for their updates because just this week, They announced the Dieselwise Indiana program, and the RFP is out for the 2020 Dieselwise Indiana DIRA with Volkswagen DIRA options. So hopefully you guys got that notice. If you didn't, you can visit their website and you can pull up the RFP. But this funding is available for clean diesel projects focused on non-road vehicles and equipment. So non-road vehicles and equipment include vehicles, engines, and equipment used for construction, agriculture, cargo handling, like port, airport, and others, as well as rail transportation, marine transportation, and others. Approximately $2.2 million is being made available through a combination of US EPA Diesel Emission Reduction Act, or what we're calling DIRA, and the DIRA option of the National Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Program. Additional funds may be available in the near future, and the project proposals submitted under this grant opportunity may be awarded from those additional funds. All vehicles and if it's an engine replacement funded under this program must be certified or verified by the California Air Resources Board, or what we call CARB, and or the US EPA. Indiana anticipates awarding cooperative agreements ranging from $50,000 to $750,000, subject to the availability of funds and the quality of the proposals received. Dieselwise Indiana expects to select projects by December of this year, with funds awarded soon thereafter. And just so you know, the proposals are due November 25th, 2020 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And for more information, I encourage you to go to in.gov/item/air quality. Yes, we did. Thanks, Kaylee. In the future, the Indiana Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust Program will announce the RFP for round 3 for clean air projects focused on equipment and vehicle repowers and replacements with newer, cleaner alternatives of various fuel types. Grant awards in the past have ranged from $50,000 to $2 million, with total available funding at $9.83 million. Eligible projects for on-road equipment and vehicles include Class 4 through 8 trucks and Class 4 through 8 school, shuttle, and public transit buses for model years 1992 to 2009. The non-road equipment and vehicle group includes airport ground support equipment, forklifts, port cargo handling equipment, lake or river ferries and tugboats, and freight switcher locomotives. All applicants requesting funding must be registered with the Indiana Secretary of State and must operate vehicles and equipment in conjunction with Indiana facilities. Should anyone have any follow-ups or questions, please feel free to reach out to me at Greater Indiana Clean Cities at the contact information listed on this slide. It's also listed on Huvo platform, so I think there's multiple ways you can get in contact with us, and we're happy to help you. Our website also has more information and resources where you can sign up for our newsletter, where we list events and funding opportunities as well. Now we will move on to the question and answer portion of our session. Remember to submit your questions in the Q&A box. And then we will wrap up with another video. So if you did have questions about the tool that Jesse was covering, and I know, Jesse, I know you and I were talking a little bit about this, about all the fantastic tools available on the AFDC website. And I was trying to be cognizant of our time constraints for these sessions, because I know a lot of people are having like Zoom and webinar fatigue. And so we are trying to be cognizant of that, but please go ahead, since we don't have any questions yet, and talk a little bit about that tool and some of the other features that are available.
Yeah, definitely. So the AFDC, the Alternative Fuels Data Center, is put on by the Department of Energy, and actually most of the people on my team actually oversee the updating and maintenance of that website. So a lot of the content, the tools on there are pretty valuable, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's really helpful for EV adoption and EV planning. And I did touch on the emissions calculator. It's actually an update that we're working on this year. It's kind of the newest update going through. I think it's actually still being rolled out currently. So you might want to maybe check back on the website in a couple weeks and see that the newer updates that I referred to there, but the previous version is still very useful as well. And on top of that, I think another tool that the AFDC is very famous for is the alternative fuels locator, or fuel station locator. And that's a tool that sort of is a mapping feature where you can find all sorts of different alt fuel stations, such as biodiesel and ethanol and things of that nature, but as well as electricity and EVSE. And you can filter by DC fast charging, by the standard option that you want. I know we had a question earlier on whether or not there was which sort of standard, whether it's a SAE or the CHAdeMO, a DC fast charging standard that's available. You can check and see which ports and the style of ports that are there. You can see what sort of power rating they are and how many are available and when they're installed. So it's a really useful feature, and it's constantly updated. And my team is always getting updates on new installations that they're adding to the map. So it's a great way to just look at your local area and see what sort of public stations are available for you. And if you get an EV, where could you charge up if you happen to want to go on a long trip?
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you brought up the station locator, because there's also the ability, there's apps for those as well.
Oh yeah, the widget features where you can sort of, I know that the Queen Cities has a lot of options where Queen Cities websites can have the widgets of these tools built in on their websites, so they don't need to redirect their users back to the AFDC site. So you could have these tools embedded within your own website, so you don't have to have your users leave and go to another site, which I think is really convenient for some people.
Right. But I guess what I was saying is that anyone with a smartphone who is an EV driver can also download an app, the station locator app, and then they can route their trip and everything and be able to find the chargers that they need.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, the if you don't plan ahead and you don't happen to think I'm going to travel here and I might need to charge, and you just have your phone on you and you realize, oh crap, I need to charge pretty soon. You can check out that on your website as well, and on your phone. And there's a nice phone-friendly application that you're happy to use.
Mm-hmm. Another one that has come up, at least in our realm, is fueleconomy.gov. And I know that would be relevant to our audience for this one when they're comparing vehicles and deciding, trying to figure out which ones are applicable and better for their budget and their operations.
Yeah, fueleconomy.gov is a great resource for vehicle efficiency metrics and looking at vehicle range. I know they have what the EPA, who I think oversees fueleconomy.gov, puts out what's referred to as the Monroney diagram, or the MPG sticker is what most people like to think to refer to it as. But it's very useful for electric vehicles because it not only portrays the EV's efficiency, but as well as their rated range. So you can kind of see how far the vehicle would travel and sort of how efficient it is from a transportation standpoint.
Mm-hmm. And I think, when we go back and we look at the tool that we just featured from you discussing those updates was emissions. And a lot of what is pushing some of the electric vehicle adoption is, people have set goals. You just heard from the city of Bloomington. The city of Carmel is also working on a climate action plan, and many others. So as part of that whole sustainability plan, they are trying to figure out how do they reduce emissions, not just for their own operations, but the community. So that was one of the things where we were looking at which tool to highlight. That's what fed into this. And we thought, many other people are going to want to calculate their emissions as well.
Right, and that's perfect coming off of the Monroney diagram discussion, because the EPA does not dictate the emissions related to electric vehicle travel, specifically because it is dependent on where you're charging your vehicle, which is a factor that the emissions calculator takes into account.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you. We do have a question from one of the attendees who asks, are smartphones required to use all EVSE? Do any not require a mobile phone at all?
I can take that, and I'll say that I'm not aware of many that require only a smartphone. I think that most of them that is a preference, but there are a lot that provide transaction processing on site as well. So it's sort of dependent on what is installed at the location. Some EVSE have the ability to run those transactions right on place as well, but there are a lot that it's more convenient for the consumer as well as the owner to have smartphones used as sort of an intermediary between the consumer and the EVSE.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a matter of knowing if they're networked and non-networked, and even I think even ChargePoint, they offer you have a card or you can use the app. So in one of the videos we showed, someone was using their phone to scan or recognizing that they had the app. But there's also cards from if you're a subscriber to a particular type of charging equipment that I know you can also use. So I think I'm just trying to help address this question for them, because no, but if you want to know where it's located, it's going to be networked and you're going to find it on an app. I guess that's probably one of the better ways to explain some of that. Were you going to add anything? Sorry, you unmuted.
Oh, I guess the only thing I could add is I know that there are some vehicles that have the feature where you can have the vehicle communicate with the EVSE and say, I'm vehicle X, I'm associated with this owner, and charge this owner's account. I know that's very common with Tesla's supercharging station. What they do is you don't always need to sign in or log in at a supercharger for Tesla. You plug it in and the charging station communicates with the vehicle, and there's a database that understands which user that vehicle is associated with, and then charges that user's account or gives them the energy they are allotted per their subscription. So that is a feature that outside of Tesla is also capable. There's a couple standards that dictate the ability for vehicles to communicate with EVSE, but it's not yet widely accepted. But I think in the future that will be what is adopted in masses, this ability for the vehicle to be associated with the owner and then communicate with the charging station. Great.
Yeah, that'll be helpful. So I'm going to take this one last question from the attendee, and then we're going to go through our conclusion. How can existing non-networked EVSEs be converted to networked ones?
Did you want to take that, or do you want me to?
So I'm going to let you take that one.
All right. So in terms of an EVSE that's not networked getting network capabilities, I'm not aware of ever hearing that happening. I know that normally with these kind of things, if it's networked, it's on a wireless cellular network, and it requires sort of that modem and antenna communication to the wireless network. I don't think that's a feature that can be added on easily afterwards. There may be some manufacturers that add an option for network features to be added on later, but I think that's something more, if you're installing EVSE, it's kind of a decision whether or not you go networked or not. And that is a potential cost savings if you go with a sort of a non-smart or a simpler EVSE that doesn't have network capabilities. You'll save in the unit costs and you won't have a data or connection fee. But the ability to upgrade that EVSE in the future to have network capabilities, I think, is very rare.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I think we are finished with the session here. So thank you again, Jesse. And I just want to say that this obviously concludes our whole program. So I hope everyone was able to tune in. If not, we do have the recordings on the Hoover platform. Myself, I'm trying to make sure we have all that offered on our website or the YouTube channel. So special thank you to our sponsors, obviously NoZone, Energy Systems Network, Ratio, Rolls-Royce, and Springbuk, as well as the event speakers, exhibitors, and all of you joining us over the last 2 days. What started off as a conversation on the needs of our area regarding electric vehicles has grown into a conference where we are offering the information providing guidance and leading others to the tools and resources they need to increase the use and adoption of electric vehicles. We hope you enjoyed the conference and gained some valuable information. Before we depart, I want to provide some upcoming related EV events. Coming up on October 6th from 1 to 2:15 p.m., Greater Indiana is hosting an electric school bus webinar in partnership with Bluebird Line Electric and the Environmental Law and Policy Center to go under the hood of electric school buses. Then on October 14th at 8 a.m., it's about a 45-minute discussion. We are partnering with ACT Research on the second session of a 3-part transportation discussion series. So you will join ACT Research Principal of Industry Analysis, Jim Neal, to fuel your day with a conversation about the electrification of heavy-duty trucks. Additional event information and links to register can be found at greaterindiana.com. And finally, please remember to take our quick 2-minute survey so we make sure we continue to plan future events and webinars of value to you. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Comfort in my car is a huge deal for me because I'm in my car so much of the day and because it's a vital part of what I do. The gas mileage is pretty terrible. I have to fill up like once a week. Have driven one once, but not for like an extended period of time. Wow, this is great. Incredibly responsive, so smooth. Would love something that just feels like it's doing all the work. But I feel like I barely have to even press the gas to get a fantastic response. I probably wouldn't have looked at this if I didn't have this experience. This is great. I might not give it back. It was awesome. It was great. I mean, really was like far beyond what I was expecting from the driving experience. We should definitely normalize electric vehicles because from a sustainability perspective, they are just like the right thing to do. And I think that the more we can incentivize people to not have to think too hard about getting an electric car, get people behind the wheels of them so you can see that it is just as good as, if not better than driving anything else. I would love it. I want to buy it.